Hi, welcome to the screencast. This is just for olfaction and gustation, or smell and taste, to make up for the fact that we skipped over them due to the snow day. I'm trying something different, as you might notice down in the corner here. There is a video of me. I thought this might make this feel like a little bit more human of an interaction. If you find it distracting, just let me know. I would love some feedback on whether or not it helps to have me down there in the corner. All right, so we are going to start with olfaction, which is the fancy anatomy and physiology word for smell. That's the first thing you want to know about it. You want to know that the organ that allows you to smell, or that gives you your sense of olfaction, is the olfactory epithelium, which is located, as you can see right here, on the roof of your nasal cavity. The receptors, or the neurons that allow you to detect smell, are called olfactory receptor cells, or bipolar neurons, and they work just like any other neuron. So you can think of the chemicals that you smell, like perfume molecules, cinnamon, nutmeg, I don't know, whatever it is that you like to eat or smell. They interact with these neurons the same way dopamine or acetylcholine would. The first sort of important thing to remember that's a little different is that the odorants, or the molecules that you are going to detect as your sense of smell, have to be dissolved in the nasal epithelium, or in the mucus of the nasal epithelium. These dissolved odorants then bind to your olfactory receptor cells, which are bipolar neurons. This is going to depolarize the bipolar neurons. They are going to send an action potential up this process, past the cell body, through these little holes in the ethmoid bone, up into the olfactory bulb. So collectively, it's all of these axons here, which sort of stream separately from one another, that make up cranial nerve number 1. So it's not one discretely bound nerve, but really just a collection of axons that run from your olfactory epithelium up into your olfactory bulb. You might remember from Anatomy and Physiology 1 which number the olfactory nerve is. If you don't remember, it's cranial nerve number 1, or Roman numeral 1, because we have to do the Roman numerals, which we all agree is silly. So the next thing you need to know is just the basic olfactory pathway. And this I have made a little simpler than it was the last time I taught A&P. So if you're using the old objectives, you want to make sure you follow the new objectives, because this is no longer an essay question. But you do need to know sort of the sequence of events, or the sequence of structures through which olfactory information is going to pass. So it's going to start with your olfactory receptor cells, which generate action potentials in response to scent molecules. They then signal to the olfactory bulb, which is underlined here. That means it's important. Then from the olfactory bulb leads the olfactory tract. You do not need to know that the cells that make up the olfactory tract are called mitral cells. It's a little detail I've gotten rid of. So receptor cells communicate with the olfactory bulb. The olfactory bulb produces or gives rise to the olfactory tract, which runs back to the olfactory cortex. This is the neurological pathway that is responsible for your perception of smell, which is just sort of raw data. It doesn't help you understand the smell. It doesn't help you identify the smell. And it's not the part of your brain where that smell brings back a memory or something. That is what the offshoots are for. And this is something, one of the few things I'm sorry that I've changed for this semester. So if this isn't what you have in your PowerPoints, just hit the pause button and write down what's on the screen, and then you can resume and I'll talk about what's on there. So that first pathway we talked about just goes to your olfactory cortex and allows you to perceive smells. There are other parts of your brain that allow for that sensation to interact with your emotion and your memory. and that is your limbic system and your hypothalamus. So in addition to olfactory information traveling back to the olfactory cortex, there are cells that wander off in different directions from the olfactory bulb and go to the limbic system and the hypothalamus. The limbic system, you may remember from Anatomy and Physiology 1, is your hippocampus, your olfactory bulb is actually considered part of it, and your amygdala, which is one of your emotional centers. So what this does is connect emotion and memory and sensation, in this case, smell. And this is why smells are such powerful reminders or powerful producers of memory. So they really bring back memories, like walking down on, I don't know, Christmas morning and smelling Christmas cookies or turkey on Thanksgiving or something. And your hypothalamus is made aware of olfactory sensations as well, but we don't really have time to go into what the hypothalamus does with that information. All right, so next up is taste. First thing you want to know about taste is that your organs of taste are called taste buds. You are going to see on the next slide that taste buds are microscopic structures. What you can see on the surface of your tongue when you look in the mirror are called papillae. So papillae is a gross anatomical structure that you can see with the naked eye. And you just need to know that foliate, circumvallate, and vallate are all forms of papillae. I will not ask you to identify them or spell them, just know that they exist. So when you look closely under a microscope at a papillae, you will find that it contains many taste buds. So this is one papillae here. It looks like a circumvallate papillae with several taste buds lining the edge of it. And then when you look in very closely on the taste bud, you can see a couple different kinds of cells. The only cell that I care you know about is the gustatory cell. This is an adapted neuron that responds to tastant molecules by depolarizing and dumping neurotransmitter onto fibers of your cranial nerves. So it's very much like your olfactory receptor, only it's a much shorter cell, so it doesn't have to generate an action potential. If this is a taste bud that detects sugar, when sugar hits these cells here, they depolarize, and that causes them to dump neurotransmitter onto these nerve fibers here, and then that signal goes up to your gustatory cortex. Like smell, also with taste, the tastant molecule, or the thing that you are tasting, has to be dissolved in saliva. If you want to experiment with this at home, you can dry off your tongue with a paper towel or have somebody else do it, and then put a little bit of sugar on there and you won't be able to taste it. There's an exercise for that in lab, but we don't do it because it's just kind of gross to dry off your lab partner's tongue. Next up is taste sensations. This is one of your essay questions. It's more of a list question. You just need to be able to list the 5 basic taste sensations. They are sweet, sour, salty, bitter, umami, and a possible sixth taste. And if you look next to it, next to the sensation, is the type of molecule that generates that sensation. So what your taste buds do is detect, or I should say specific taste buds detect specific molecules, and when the brain gets input from those taste buds, then it knows what types of molecules are on the tongue. So sweet is obviously things like sugar, glucose, sucrose, fructose, any of the oses. Anything that's sour is hydrogen ions. So if you think like lemonade and what's the other one I'm looking for? Lime juice are very sour because of the citric acid. Sour cream is sour because it has bacteria in it that produce lactic acid, or lactobacillus. It's the same thing that gives yogurt its tanginess, is lactic acid produced by lactic acid producing bacteria. So anything that's sour is somewhat acidic. Salt is metal ions, so sodium is, and I should say is, a metal in its elemental form. It looks like a metal, but you don't see it lying around that way in nature because it's highly reactive, so it's always bound up ionically as a salt. Bitter, as it says here, is alkaloid. Really what you want to think with bitter is different chemicals that come from plants. Plants are like little pharmaceutical machineries that churn out all different kinds of chemicals. Some of them taste good, some of them not so much. And then umami was discovered by a team of Japanese researchers, and we have kept the original Japanese name for it, which is kind of nice. You can call it savory if you want to. What it really is glutamic acid or glutamate. It's one of the amino acids that makes up protein. So what meat tastes like to you is the amino acids that make up the meat. And this is why people add monosodium glutamate to dishes to make it make it taste more savory. The sixth possible sense, which hasn't been confirmed yet, or there isn't scientific consensus on yet, is fat. We know that fat is good at dissolving certain flavors, and we know that fat provides mouthfeel, which contributes to your perception of how a food tastes. But there's some recent evidence to show that there are actual taste receptors that respond to triglycerides or fats. It just hasn't been completely confirmed yet. Then the gustatory pathway, I do believe I have changed this just a little bit, but I've also tried to make it a little simpler. So you want to know what's underlined. First, that it is cranial nerves 7, I almost said 5, 7 and 9 that innervate your tongue, and that is the facial and hypoglossal nerve. I always have to check for number 9. I can't remember that one. And then all you want to know is that ultimately the information gets from cranial nerves 7 and 9 to the gustatory cortex. It is not important that taste information makes these pit stops at these different places, but it does. Then, in addition to taste information traveling this route to get to the gustatory cortex, there are neurons that branch off in different directions, just like there are for smell, that go to your limbic system and your hypothalamus. The limbic system, again, is tying memory and emotion together. And if you think about it, it's especially important for food when you think about human evolution and human survival. So before we had packaged foods with expiration dates, if you ate something and it made you sick, you had to remember that and not eat it again. And that's why we all have such visceral reactions to things that have made us sick. And it's so hard to eat something that you associate with getting ill because your body or your brain remembers that. And then your hypothalamus is especially made aware of when you eat and when you drink so that it can help you regulate thirst and hunger. Most of you are probably aware of the fact that what you smell plays a large role in your perception of taste. So taste is 80% smell. This is why when you have a cold and your nose gets all plugged up, things don't taste as good. You don't have to have, how should I put it? You don't have to breathe in through your nose to get the smell. Some of the air rises up from the back of your palate into your nose. It's called retronasal olfaction. So even if you don't have your nose directly over your plate, you're still getting scent from your mouth up into your nose. And then, as I was saying earlier, you have thermoreceptors and mechanoreceptors and all kinds of other receptors in your mouth that contribute to your overall perception of the food. So things like temperature, texture, whether something is firm or soft, chewy or crunchy, all of these contribute to what you perceive as taste. And as food is a big business, you can imagine that there is a lot of science behind understanding taste and how we perceive it. Oh, there's eyebrows. We're all done. Thank you for sticking around. Wow, that was 14 minutes. I hope this was helpful. Good luck on the exam.